When most people begin exploring bourbon, they assume that price and popularity automatically guarantee quality. But the truth is far more complicated. The American bourbon market is filled with hundreds of labels, marketing campaigns, celebrity endorsements, and flashy bottles. Some of them genuinely represent centuries of craft and tradition. Others exist mostly as branding exercises, designed to look premium while delivering a fairly average drinking experience. Knowing the difference between these bottles can save both money and disappointment. Bourbon, by law, must be made primarily from corn, at least 51% of the grain mash, and aged in new charred oak barrels. This process gives bourbon its signature flavors of caramel, vanilla, toasted oak, and spice. However, even within these rules, quality can vary widely depending on ingredients, aging time, distillation methods, and blending decisions. Some brands focus on careful craftsmanship, while others rely heavily on mass production and marketing appeal. One of the biggest traps for new bourbon drinkers is falling for brands that spend more on branding than on the actual whiskey inside the bottle. These brands often use premium-looking packaging, romantic backstories, and attractive labels that make them seem more refined than they really are. In reality, many of them come from the same large industrial distilleries producing millions of barrels each year. That doesn't automatically make them bad, but it does mean that the whiskey itself may not be as distinctive as the marketing suggests. Take, for example, Basil Hayden's. On store shelves, it looks elegant and sophisticated. The bottle design is stylish, the labeling suggests heritage craftsmanship, and the brand is marketed as part of a prestigious small-batch collection. But many bourbon enthusiasts argue that the whiskey inside is surprisingly light and diluted for its price point. It is bottled at just 80 proof, making it one of the lowest-strength bourbons in its category. While some drinkers appreciate its smoothness, others feel it lacks the bold flavor that makes bourbon exciting. Another commonly debated bottle is Bulleit Bourbon. The brand is extremely popular and widely available around the world. Its recipe uses a relatively high percentage of rye in the mash bill, giving it a spicy profile compared to sweeter bourbons. While many people enjoy that spice, critics sometimes argue that Bulleit relies heavily on sourced whiskey and marketing image rather than unique distillation identity. For some drinkers, it's a solid mixing bourbon, but not the most exciting option for sipping. Budget bourbon can also be a gamble. Some inexpensive bottles offer incredible value, while others cut corners in ways that affect flavor. A classic example often mentioned in discussions is Kentucky Tavern. This bourbon has been around since the late 19th century and is widely known as an affordable option. However, its lower price point can sometimes reflect simpler aging and blending techniques, resulting in a flavor profile that many enthusiasts describe as thinner and less complex than premium bottles. Another bottle that divides opinions is Fighting Cock. Despite its bold name and relatively high proof of 103, some drinkers feel its flavor can be rough or unbalanced compared with other bourbons in the same price range. High proof alone does not guarantee quality. What matters is how well the flavors integrate during aging. Of course, not every widely available bourbon deserves criticism. In fact, some of the most respected bourbons in the world are also among the most accessible. These bottles consistently deliver strong flavor, reliable quality, and excellent value for money. One of the most respected names in bourbon is Wild Turkey. Produced in Kentucky for decades, this brand is known for its bold, rich flavor profile and higher proof expressions. Bottles like Wild Turkey 101 have developed a loyal following because they offer intense caramel, spice, and oak flavors without requiring an expensive price tag. Unlike many brands that prioritize smoothness above all else, Wild Turkey embraces the full character of bourbon. Another standout option is Maker's Mark. This bourbon is famous for its distinctive red wax seal and its wheated mash bill, which replaces rye with wheat. The result is a smoother, slightly sweeter flavor profile that appeals to both beginners and experienced drinkers. Maker's Mark has maintained consistent quality for decades, making it one of the safest choices for someone entering the world of bourbon. Then there is Buffalo Trace, widely considered one of the best value bourbons on the market. Produced at the historic Buffalo Trace Distillery in Kentucky, This bourbon delivers remarkable complexity for its price. Many enthusiasts describe notes of vanilla, caramel, brown sugar, and spice balanced by oak. Its reputation has grown so strong that in some regions it has become difficult to find on store shelves. Another reliable bottle is Jim Beam, one of the best-selling bourbon brands in the world. While its basic white label version is often used for mixing, the brand also produces several higher-quality expressions that are surprisingly good for their price. Jim Beam's long history and large-scale production sometimes lead people to overlook it, but its consistency and accessibility have helped define bourbon culture for generations. Understanding which bourbons are worth drinking also requires recognizing personal taste. Some people prefer sweeter wheated bourbons, while others enjoy spicy rye-heavy recipes. Some drinkers want something smooth and easy, while others prefer powerful high-proof bottles that deliver intense flavor. Online communities often debate these differences passionately. In whiskey discussion forums, enthusiasts frequently recommend exploring single-barrel or higher-proof expressions when possible, because they reveal more of the spirit's natural character. A large percentage of sourced bourbons in the United States historically came from one massive distillery, MGP Ingredients Distillery. This facility produces enormous volumes of whiskey that are later sold to other brands. Over the years, dozens of bourbon labels have quietly relied on MGP whiskey while building their own brand identities. Again, the whiskey itself can be good, but when a brand charges premium prices while simply bottling sourced stock, enthusiasts sometimes feel the value does not match the cost. Another common mistake new bourbon drinkers make is assuming older whiskey is always better. Age statements can be important indicators of maturity, but they are not the only factor determining quality. A bourbon aged too long can actually become overly dominated by oak flavors, masking the natural sweetness of the corn mash. On the other hand, younger bourbons sometimes deliver vibrant grain character and spice that older bottles lose over time. Skilled distillers carefully monitor barrels during aging to decide when the whiskey has reached its ideal balance. This is one reason that brands like Four Roses have gained such strong reputations among enthusiasts. Four Roses uses multiple mash bills and yeast strains to create different flavor profiles, which are then blended to achieve complexity and balance. Their single-barrel and small batch expressions often appear on recommended bourbon lists because they combine reasonable pricing with impressive craftsmanship. Another bottle frequently praised for its value is Evan Williams, particularly the bottled-in-bond version. This bourbon follows strict production rules established by U.S. law. It must be the product of one distillation season, aged at least 4 years, and bottled at exactly 100 proof. These regulations ensure a certain level of consistency and quality. Many whiskey enthusiasts consider Evan Williams Bottled in Bond one of the best budget-friendly bourbons available. The world of bourbon also includes premium bottles that genuinely justify their higher prices. For example, Blanton's helped pioneer the concept of single-barrel bourbon when it was introduced in the 1980s. Each bottle comes from an individual barrel rather than a large blended batch, meaning subtle flavor differences appear from bottle to bottle. Collectors are also drawn to the distinctive horse and jockey stoppers placed on top of the bottles, which have become iconic among bourbon fans. Another respected name is Woodford Reserve. Produced in small copper pot stills and aged carefully in oak barrels, Woodford Reserve is known for its rich and balanced profile featuring notes of dried fruit, spice, caramel, and toasted oak. It has become a staple in many bourbon collections because it offers both complexity and accessibility. Understanding this distinction can help people avoid wasting money. Some drinkers buy premium bottles for cocktails simply because they assume more expensive means better. In reality, the subtle complexities of a high-end bourbon can sometimes disappear once mixed with bitters, sugar, or citrus. Saving those bottles for sipping often makes more sense. Another growing trend in bourbon culture is barrel finishing. Distillers are increasingly experimenting with aging bourbon in secondary barrels that previously held other spirits or wines. For example, barrels that once contained sherry, port, or rum can add additional layers of flavor during the finishing stage. These experiments have created exciting new variations within the bourbon category, though they can also increase prices significantly. One brand that has explored creative finishes is Angel's Envy. Their port-finished bourbon spends additional time aging in port wine barrels after its initial maturation in charred oak. This process introduces subtle notes of fruit and sweetness that distinguish it from traditional bourbons. For many drinkers, this kind of innovation adds an exciting dimension to the whiskey experience. Still, the bourbon market today is more crowded than ever. Dozens of new brands appear each year, each claiming to offer something unique. Some deliver on that promise. Others rely heavily on marketing buzzwords like small batch, handcrafted, or limited release, terms that do not always have strict definitions in the whiskey industry. For consumers, the best defense against disappointment is education. Reading labels, researching distilleries, and tasting a variety of bourbons can quickly reveal which brands genuinely stand out. Over time, drinkers begin to recognize the flavor characteristics they enjoy most. Whether that means bold spice, smooth sweetness, smoky oak, or complex layers of fruit and caramel. It is also worth remembering that bourbon culture is deeply tied to American history. The spirit has roots stretching back centuries, particularly in Kentucky, where limestone-rich water and ideal climate conditions helped shape the industry. Many of today's distilleries still operate in regions where bourbon production began generations ago. This heritage contributes to the sense of tradition and authenticity that makes bourbon appealing to so many people. In the end, choosing which bourbons to avoid and which to embrace is less about strict rules and more about understanding value. Some bottles look impressive but fail to deliver the flavor their price suggests. Others, sometimes sitting quietly on the bottom shelf, offer remarkable quality for surprisingly little money. Once you learn to recognize those differences, the bourbon aisle stops being overwhelming and starts becoming an adventure. Instead of chasing hype or expensive labels, you begin discovering bottles that truly reflect the craftsmanship behind American whiskey. And when that happens, every pour becomes more satisfying, not because of the brand name on the bottle, but because of the character in the glass. In the end, bourbon's magic comes from its balance of science, tradition, and patience. Every bottle represents years of aging inside wooden barrels, slowly absorbing flavors from the charred oak. Time, temperature, and craftsmanship shape each drop. And once you begin to understand the difference between bourbon that merely looks impressive and bourbon that actually tastes extraordinary, the entire world of American whiskey becomes far more rewarding to explore.